Parents kicked me out after graduation. "You're too useless to even live here," Dad said. I smiled quietly and walked away. Last night, he called me crying after. It happened just after the graduation ceremony, when the buzz of possibility still clung to the air like smoke after fireworks. I came home wearing my cap crooked and clutching my diploma, a bachelor's degree in computer science from a decent university, the first in our family to earn one. I thought maybe, just maybe, my parents would look at me differently now. Maybe my father, Alan, would finally stop seeing me as a burden. Maybe my mother, Joyce, would stop shrinking into the background whenever he tore into me. I was wrong. We barely made it to dinner before it happened. Dad sat across from me at the kitchen table, still wearing his work boots, dust and bitterness trailing him like a second skin. He didn't even wait for me to sit down properly. "You think that piece of paper changes anything?" he sneered, jabbing a callous finger at my diploma lying on the table. "You're too useless to even live here." The words hung in the air, thick and sour, like a storm about to break. I glanced at my mother. She stirred her tea mechanically, her eyes glued to the swirling liquid, pretending not to hear. I waited for her to say something. Anything. But she didn't. She never did. I could have fought back. Could have shouted, thrown years of resentment in their faces. But instead, I smiled, small and steady. A quiet defiance. I picked up my backpack, the one thing I'd packed in case the day ever came. Slinging it over my shoulder, I looked at them both one last time. No anger. No tears. Just a smile. And I walked out the door without a sound. The first night was the hardest. I sat on a bus bench 3 blocks from the only home I'd ever known, the streetlights casting long, cold shadows. The night buzzed with the low hum of traffic, and I pulled my hoodie tighter against the creeping chill. All I had was my backpack, a battered laptop, a few changes of clothes, and a phone with 32% battery. I called a couple of friends. Some didn't pick up. Some made excuses, too busy, not enough space, maybe next week. The only one who answered and meant it was Tyler, a guy I'd known since my first year of college. He lived in a cramped studio with a broken heater and a mattress on the floor, but he told me, "You can crash here, man. It's not much, but it's something." It was something. For a few nights, his floor became my world. I worked odd jobs during the day, delivering food, fixing computers, sometimes even walking dogs. Whatever paid. At night, while Tyler slept, I'd sit in the corner with my laptop plugged into the one working outlet, stealing Wi-Fi from the coffee shop downstairs. I didn't waste those nights. I coded. God, I coded like a man possessed. Projects, small freelance gigs from shady forums, anything. I learned more in those sleepless nights than I had in 4 years of lectures. Not just coding, business, marketing, startups. I devoured free courses and e-books like a starving man devours bread. When Tyler's landlord cracked down on guess, I moved on. A night at an internet cafe. 2 nights at a grimy motel that smelled like bleach and sadness. Sometimes, just sleeping on a bus that looped through the city until dawn. My world shrank to the glow of a laptop screen and the silent promises I made to myself in those empty hours. I will make it. I will never need them again. The real turning point came one night at 2:13 a.m., sitting at a cracked plastic table in a rundown diner. I was nursing a cheap coffee, tapping out lines of code, when the idea hit me. Simple. Clean. Something I could build without a team or funding. An app for freelancers, better contracts, better payment protection, better client communication. No frills, just reliability. I sketched the first blueprint on a napkin between sips of bitter coffee. By sunrise, the first prototype was already alive on my laptop. It wasn't perfect. It barely worked. But it was real. It was mine. And as I sat there watching the morning sun smear pink and gold across the cracked windows of that sad little diner, I realized something. They thought they'd thrown me away like trash. What they really did was set me free. The months that followed were brutal. The app, Freelance Fortress, started as a shaky beta I pushed into obscure tech forums and freelancer groups. No budget for ads, no contacts, no fancy PR. Just me, grinding day after day, fixing bugs, answering emails, watching every single user sign up like it was a tiny miracle. And somehow it grew. Slowly. Painfully. But it grew. By the end of the first year, I had just over 1,500 users. Barely enough to survive, but enough to breathe without fear every morning. I still slept on couches and cheap rentals, but now I had something they couldn't take away. I was building something real. One night, after a 14-hour coding marathon, I finally caved and Googled my parents. Old habits, I guess. I found a Facebook post from my dad, Alan. He was holding a fishing rod, grinning wide, captioned, "Finally some peace and quiet without the extra baggage." Comments from friends congratulated him on his freedom. In the background of the photo, I spotted my old high school jacket tossed over the back of his pickup, left to rot under the sun. Like a piece of trash. That night, for the first time in months, I didn't work. I just sat there, staring at that photo, feeling something ice-cold settle into my chest. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was clarity. They didn't love me. They didn't even like me. I was a burden. A punching bag. An unwanted guest who had overstayed his welcome in their story of a perfect life. I closed my laptop slowly, the cheap plastic creaking under my fingers, and leaned back in my chair. Fine. They want me gone? Then they'll never find me again. Not the man they threw out. Not the boy they thought would come crawling back, begging for scraps. That night, I made a decision. No more waiting for validation. No more checking for texts that would never come. No more explaining myself. I would build my company. I would build my life. And when the day came, and it would come, they would look for me and find a stranger. Someone they didn't even recognize anymore. Someone they could never hurt again. From that moment on, I worked like a man possessed. I stopped couch surfing and rented a cheap, crumbling studio apartment, the kind of place where the walls were so thin you could hear your neighbor cough through two of them. No furniture, just a mattress on the floor, a second-hand desk I found abandoned on a sidewalk, and a Wi-Fi router that barely stayed connected. But it was mine. And in that cracked little apartment, I rebuilt myself from scratch. I polished Freelance Fortress day and night. Tweaked the features. Added payment protections, a messaging hub, a simple contract generator. I didn't have money for advertising, so I learned growth hacking by trial and error. I bartered free versions of my software for shoutouts from other struggling freelancers with followings. I posted in forums, wrote articles, answered questions on Reddit and Quora, wherever anyone would listen. It was a grind. I was invisible to the world. But in the background, my world was shifting. Slowly, I built a name for myself, anonymous at first. Just a username. Then a reputation. Then, unbelievably, a brand. 2 years after that first night on the bus bench, Freelance Fortress crossed 50,000 users. One morning, I woke up to an email from a venture capitalist named David Calloway. Short. Blunt. "You built something impressive. Let's talk." At first, I thought it was a scam. I ignored it. He emailed again. Then called. Turned out, David had heard about me through a third-degree connection, a small-time tech blogger I'd once done an interview with for free. He liked people who built things with nothing. He offered to invest, but under one condition. "You stay the CEO. You don't sell out. You lead this thing." I remember sitting at the rickety desk in my apartment, the sun leaking through the dirty blinds, and thinking, this is it. I shook his hand 2 weeks later in a coffee shop that still served burnt diner coffee for $1 a cup. David's investment wasn't massive compared to Silicon Valley standards, but it was enough to move into a real office, enough to hire 2 developers, a marketing guy, and finally pay myself something beyond survival wages. Enough to turn a dream into a weapon. By the 3rd year, we hit $2 million in annual revenue. Not unicorn startup money. But enough to live comfortably. Enough to stop worrying about rent. Enough to be respected. I moved into a high-rise downtown. Sleek, minimal, all glass and steel. The kind of place where, at night, you can see the entire city blinking beneath you like a map of possibilities. I had made it. Not because they believed in me. Not because anyone handed me a thing. Because when they threw me away, I chose to build wings from the wreckage. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday night. I was sitting in my new apartment, high above the city. The skyline stretched wide and endless before me, lights blinking like distant stars. I just wrapped up a call with my team overseas when my phone buzzed. Dad. The name glared at me from the screen like a ghost I hadn't invited. For a second, I just stared at it, stunned. It had been nearly 4 years since the day he kicked me out. 4 years without a single word. No birthday texts. No emails. Nothing. I thought about ignoring it. Let it ring into silence like all the times they'd let me stand alone. But something inside me, curiosity, maybe, made me swipe to answer. I didn't say anything at first. Just held the phone to my ear and listened. There was a moment of crackling static, like he couldn't find the words. Then his voice broke through, thin, desperate, trembling in a way I had never heard before. Son, it's your father. Please. I need your help. He was crying. Not the angry, blustering man I remembered, this was a man drowning. I stayed silent, letting him stew in it. He kept talking, words tumbling over each other. The bad investments he'd made, the health problems that drained their savings, the friends who turned their backs after he'd burned every bridge he ever walked across. They were broke. Penniless. Facing eviction. And now, suddenly, the useless son they had discarded like trash was the only person left who could save them. He finally choked out the words he must have thought he'd never say. I'm sorry. I was wrong. We need you. I closed my eyes, breathing in the silence between us. I thought about the nights sleeping in bus stations, the cheap coffee, the way my mother's eyes had darted away from mine while Dad called me useless. I thought about the cracked steps I walked down when I left, the door slamming shut behind me without a second glance. I opened my eyes slowly, staring out at the city glittering beneath me. My voice came out cold. Controlled. Sharp enough to cut. Do you remember what you told me, Dad? That I was too useless to even live in your house. The silence on the line was deafening. I remember. I continued, my voice like iron. Every word. Every moment. He tried to stammer something, but I cut him off. You didn't just kick me out of your house. You kicked me out of your life. You made sure I knew I wasn't worth keeping. He was full-on sobbing now, a broken sound that might have shaken me once, but not anymore. I was stronger now. Sharper. Untouchable. I thought about offering something symbolic, maybe a minimum-wage janitor job at one of my satellite offices. Make him beg in front of strangers. Watch him feel the humiliation he once served me so easily. But in the end, he didn't deserve even that. Some debts are too deep to be repaid in kindness. I took a slow, deliberate breath. And then I said the words that sealed everything. I'm sorry, Dad. But I'm too useless to help you. Click. I hung up without waiting for his reply. And I never looked back. The moment I ended the call, the world fell quiet again. Not the kind of quiet that presses against your chest and suffocates you. This was different. This was peace. I set the phone down on the marble counter, the soft click of plastic against stone sounding final, almost ceremonial. Outside, the city kept humming, oblivious. Life went on, people rushing through their evenings, their stories weaving through towers and streets I'd once only dreamed of reaching. And here I was. Not the scared kid with the backpack. Not the outcast, not the burden. But the man who had built something from nothing. I thought maybe I would feel guilty. Maybe the old memories would come clawing back, dragging me under. Maybe I would wonder if I'd gone too far. But I didn't. Not even for a second. Because standing at that window, watching the endless stretch of lights, I understood something so clearly it stunned me. You cannot save people who threw you away to save themselves. You cannot heal by reopening the same wounds over and over, hoping this time the knife won't cut so deep. You cannot rebuild the bridges they took pleasure in burning. They made their choice. They chose the easy comfort of cruelty over the hard work of love. And now I had chosen too. I chose me. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was living, fully, fiercely, unapologetically. I turned away from the window, poured myself a glass of water, and sat down at the heavy oak desk in the corner of my loft. My laptop blinked awake, full of unread emails, partnership offers, new contracts, interviews, speaking engagements. The world wanted what I had to give. And for once, it wasn't my family demanding it in silence, expecting it for free. It was my life now. Mine alone. A few days after the call, when the dust had already settled in my mind, an idea crept in. Not a cruel one. Not revenge. Just a mirror. A reflection of everything they'd once handed me. I drafted an email. Short. Professional. Clinical. Subject: employment opportunity. Dear Alan and Joyce, we have recently opened several entry-level positions at one of our satellite offices. One role in particular might be a perfect fit: custodial assistant, part-time, night shifts available. Compensation is competitive with local minimum wage. No prior experience necessary. Uniforms provided. If you are interested in applying, please respond to this email within 48 hours. All the best. Benjamin Carter. Founder and CEO, Freelance Fortress. I sat there for a long moment before hitting send. It wasn't rage that fueled me. It wasn't even pettiness. It was closure. A full circle. I gave them exactly what they gave me back then: dismissiveness dressed up as practicality. An opportunity they were far too proud to take, even if it was the only hand being offered. I knew they wouldn't reply. I knew they would be furious. But I also knew, with every fiber of my being, that I had closed the loop. They would feel it, that heavy, sinking feeling they once left in me. And they would realize they were no longer the ones holding the power. It had shifted. It was mine now. And they were just two strangers, lost somewhere far outside the life I had built. It didn't take long. Barely 12 hours after I sent the email, my phone buzzed violently across my desk. First, a text from my mother. "How dare you humiliate us like this? After everything we've done for you." Then another, seconds later. "You think you're better than us now? Just because you got lucky?" And then one from my father, blunt, raw, laced with the same fury I remembered from the kitchen table that night he kicked me out. "Don't contact us again. If this is who you've become, you're no son of mine." I sat there, staring at the screen, feeling nothing. No anger. No sadness. Not even the distant ache of disappointment. Just silence. It was almost funny, how predictable they were. The moment they realized the roles had reversed, that they were the ones knocking on doors, not me, they did what they'd always done. Shift the blame. Rewrite the story. Pretend none of it was their fault. For a second, I wondered if they even remembered the words they hurled at me the day they kicked me out. If they remembered how easy it had been for them to turn their backs when I had nothing but a backpack and a crumpled degree. Maybe they did. Maybe that was the real reason for the venom now, not just shame, but fear. The fear of realizing they had raised a man strong enough to survive without them. Stronger than they ever thought possible. Stronger than they could ever understand. I turned the phone face down, blocking out the notifications still pouring in, and leaned back in my chair. Above me, the city pulsed with life. Ambition. Freedom. My world. Not theirs. For the first time, they had no say in it. And they never would again. In the weeks that followed, the messages slowed. First daily. Then weekly. Then nothing. It was like they had simply dissolved back into the shadows of my life, the way smoke thins out after a fire has burned everything it can. I didn't chase them. I didn't wonder. I didn't hope. The boy who once waited by the window for any scrap of affection was gone. The man standing in his place had better things to do. Instead, I poured myself back into building, into growing, into living. Freelance Fortress continued to climb. New partnerships, a second office opening on the West Coast, invitations to conferences I'd once only read about, not as a guest, but as a keynote speaker. I shook hands with people who respected me not for the blood in my veins, but for the work I had carved into reality with my own two hands. And somewhere along the way, the sting of that night, the night they threw me away, became something else. Not a scar. A brand. A reminder. A badge of survival, not of shame. Sometimes I would sit by the floor-to-ceiling windows of my apartment late at night, a glass of something expensive in hand, and let my mind drift. Not with bitterness. Not even with sadness. Just with a quiet, steady understanding. They taught me exactly what I needed to know. Not by loving me. Not by supporting me. But by leaving me. By showing me, in the most brutal way possible, that real strength is not something you're born into. It's something you forge when there's no one left to catch you. And standing there, looking out at the city sprawling wide and endless beneath the stars, I realized the most important truth of all. I didn't owe them forgiveness. I didn't owe them anything. I had already given myself everything I ever needed.